It's not often that cities so small are affected by something so huge, and yet, for one tiny community, that's exactly what happened. It was in the early morning hours that the residents of the normally calm and sleepy town of Pentalpha Pines were violently woken up by an inexplicable earthquake that shook their homes to their very foundations. And even when the rumbling ceased, the townsfolk soon realized their problems were only just beginning when the sounds of a fire truck alarm echoed into the night. Many who lived closer to the city center even caught a whiff of smoke, for the smell was that strong. A few were brave enough to leave their homes to investigate, only to bear witness to their town's benchmark going up in flames. The Pentangle Community Center, a centuries-long central hub for countless meetings, activities, and events in Pentalpha Pines, was reduced to a pile of rubble and burning ash in mere minutes. Its iconic bell tower now just a memory for those who grew up seeing it every day of their lives. Our news team was only able to arrive to record the sad aftermath and begin to piece together what exactly happened, and it's the why where things get strange. Eyewitnesses described the inferno as, quote, as blue as a daytime sky, like the flame on a kitchen stove multiplied 1,000 times over, unquote. Many also claimed to have possibly heard someone screaming from within the building, but no one could go in to attempt a rescue. Only later was the fire department able to make a sweep but found no human remains save for a few bones that have been confirmed to have come from an animal. Stranger still, the department has found no probable cause for what ignited the building. While some suspect arson, no clear evidence of a crime has been found, with the investigation still ongoing. But most mysterious of all, Pentalpha Pines Mayor Judd Kane, noted to be a very active figurehead in the city, is nowhere to be found. Not at his home, not at his office in town hall, and his personal phone lines all remain silent, with his legal aides preparing to file a missing persons report if he isn't found in the next 24 hours. In the meantime, this small but strong community has already begun the process of trying to clean up this horrific mess and rebuild what they lost. But for the residents of Pentalpha Pines, this is one disaster that will remain in their memories forever, proving that even small towns can be the source of big news. Our correspondent team is working to piece together a clearer narrative, and will keep you updated should any new information be uncovered. I hoped I looked decent and had the camera angled right. It was the first time I was having to work without a cameraman. I had to fight to not roll my eyes anytime I said "our news team" in my initial broadcast. The reality was that it was just me having to record everything on my own. It's not standard practice at our station, but with our crew stretched thin and this disaster happening so unexpectedly quick, my bosses had little choice but to send their only available correspondent, i.e. me, all by his lonesome to go play Sherlock Holmes in a tiny-ass town that most people probably forgot about until someone or something reminded them of it. So, armed with my laptop, recording apps on my phone, and 2 cameras, one primary and one for backup, the station sent me out in one of their more compact news vans to investigate why an earthquake and major fire decided to crop up in the small town of Pentalpha Pines, Maine. And when I say small, I mean small. I knew it was going to be one of those backwater places the moment I arrived and realized there wasn't a single McDonald's or any major fast food chain to be found. So much for grabbing a sausage McMuffin to reward myself for getting there at the ass crack of dawn. Instead, I just had to ignore my growling stomach as I pulled into the parking lot of what was once the Pentangle Community Center. I didn't even need the help of my phone's GPS to find it. There were enough fire trucks, police cars, an ambulance, and an ever-growing peanut gallery of spectators to make their town's destroyed landmark impossible to miss. The plume of thick dark smoke rising up from the charred remains of the building wasn't even finished dissipating into the sky when I whipped out my credentials to flash to the authorities before setting to work on giving our station's viewers something interesting to stew over as they went through their morning routines. And hopefully I'd find even more juicy tidbits for the evening audience to have something to talk about at the dinner table. My small town instincts proved correct when I began to interview anyone who was willing to talk, and I got bombarded by all manner of gossip. From what I was able to gather, Pentalpha Pines had a population of roughly 1,000 people, just big enough to be spotted on a map, but rural enough that everyone knew each other's business, with the most exciting thing to come to town being the annual 4th of July fair or farmers market. And judging by how not everyone in the gaggle of onlookers had a phone whipped out to text the horrors to all their friends, I had a hunch this place wasn't the quickest on updating to the latest tech or fads. As I later found out, this town prided itself on its local businesses. The outlet malls an hour drive away was probably the most modern thing they had. But on to what actually brought me there. The former bell tower was situated smack in the middle of town and served as the Pentangle Community Center. Being the victim of both an earthquake and a fire left it the most wrecked out of anything in the county, and it quickly became clear this was the first, biggest, and possibly only disaster Pentalpha Pines ever had to deal with. When I finally spoke to the fire chief and the community center volunteers, they claimed they couldn't determine a clear cause for the fire, and many were just blaming it on the earthquake. Funny thing though, a few of the witnesses told me they were certain they didn't feel the earthquake until after the fire started. But I knew fear and panic could make someone's memory faulty, so I didn't bother mentioning it to the chief unless I found definite proof. Well, to find anything, it's best to retrace your steps. Look for the source, for anything out of place. So I asked the community center workers if they noticed or remembered anything weird or noteworthy happening prior to the disaster. No one had an answer for me, save for one volunteer who mentioned hiring a handyman to fix the center's hot water tank and furnace 4 days prior. When I ran this past the authorities, they said they were very certain the building equipment was in perfect working order the night of the fire and wasn't the cause. To anyone out there who has aspirations of being an investigator, know this: never leave any stone unturned, no matter how small. Call it reporter's instincts, a proverbial muscle that's wise to exercise it. It helped me uncover a slew of stories that would have never been told otherwise. Case in point, I asked the volunteer if he kept the handyman's information. Thankfully he did, and after a bit of rummaging, he handed me this business card. I stepped aside to try and call the number, but only got an answering machine. A voice tinted with a bit of a Brooklyn accent replied, "You've reached Mike Dante. If you need some handyman help, leave a message at the beep and I'll get back to you. Thanks." Kind of odd the guy didn't have an email address printed on his card. All I could do was just leave a voicemail asking him to call me back. I didn't mention I was a reporter, didn't want him to immediately try to duck out on me. Still, the studio needed something to air for the early risers, so after giving my one-man show report with what info I had, I set out to find a bite to eat. The onlookers, who were still gawking at the pile of ash as though the bell tower would magically reconstitute itself if they stared long enough, were helpful in pointing me towards Phil and Tom's bed and breakfast, the closest thing Pentalpha Pines had to a hotel. It was an old colonial-style house with lavender wood siding, a wraparound deck with multiple porch swings, and came in a size you wouldn't consider a mansion, but was far from small either. I was soon seated in a rather cozy dining area, complete with a fireplace, and it was then I understood why there were no fast food places to be found. They weren't needed. The eggs, bacon, sausage, and pancakes I ordered were mouth-wateringly good. Suddenly I wasn't missing that sausage McMuffin anymore. With my growling stomach finally satiated for the moment, I took the time to check in with my boss. And here comes another piece of advice to any future reporters. Don't just be ready for anything, but also be ready for stuff to take way longer than you planned. I knew I'd be in for the long haul when my boss started rambling about the fire, the earthquake, the missing mayor, an old town that never gets talked about, and a bunch of other newsworthy opportunities she didn't want to turn a blind eye to. She must have sensed my hesitation at the prospect of being trapped in this town for more than a few days, because she was quick to offer me a sizable bonus in my next paycheck. She also knew I had no spouse or pets to look after either. Well, it's typically not a good idea to turn down extra money, so I caved in. In return, she granted me access to the studio's company credit card for traveling expenses and gave me a week tops to dig for more dirt. After informing Phil and Tom that I'd now be staying in their lovely abode for the next few days, and how convenient that I stopped here to eat, the two happily led me to a room ripped straight from Little House on the Prairie, with a freestanding closet, a desk, and a bed covered in the kind of quilt a grandma would sew for a grandchild who would force a smile and pretend to like. At least it also had its own bathroom. After catching up on lost sleep and waking up in time for the lunch rush, I spent the rest of the afternoon researching the bell tower, compiling all my notes, making lists of which people I'd have to get more in-depth interviews with, and shooting some new footage of the slightly cleaned up disaster area for our evening broadcast. Only as I was double-checking my work did I spot the business card that one volunteer had given me, and when I realized my call was never returned, on a whim I typed Dante's Handiwork in a search online to see if I could find any other contact info. Still no trace of an email and no dice on an address either. Apparently this business had no brick-and-mortar building. I figured the guy probably just worked out of his van, and his website had the appearance of something born out of the Web 1.0 era and was barely updated since. Facing a dead end there, I then tried doing a more general search to see if I could hunt down any client reviews in the hope that his customers would yield any clues about the guy. I eventually hit upon a few between Angie and Thumbtack dating back a month or two, with the earliest one originating from Pentalpha Pines judging by the included photos. But now I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I've run into my fair share of craziness in all my years of working for a TV station. Bank robberies, kidnappings, natural disasters, it's all old hat to me. This wasn't the first time I had to dive down a strange rabbit hole to find a story. But this, by far, would be the weirdest chain of events I've ever encountered, before or since. What I'm about to explain is a compilation of all the information relating to the Pentalpha Pines disaster I was able to find, placed in rough chronological order between how I found the info and when each notable event took place. I'm not certain how much of this will make it to broadcast, but for my own sanity, I at least have to chronicle this in my personal journal. All I know for sure is that the Better Business Bureau is going to have a field day with this. I'll begin by saying that beyond the initial interviews when I first got into town, this strange journey truly began when I looked into the bell tower's history. Old significant buildings burning up or getting torn down always stir up emotions in the reader or listener. Apparently the bell tower was a church back in ye olden days, we're talking 1800s old, and was later converted into the Pentangle Community Center. Actually, this whole town was pretty old, founded by farmers and other settlers a century or two ago, with the bell tower serving as a centerpiece and the surrounding businesses and neighborhoods being built around it. It seemed many of the neighborhoods contained at least one or two very old houses that remain standing to this day, with the obvious renovations here and there, as attested by the very first Angie review I could find regarding Dante's Handiwork. Hi there! For 4 days now I've been getting my bathroom remodeled, and now that it's done, I felt the need to leave a review just to show how good a job the hired help did, because hardworking people need more positive reviews and not just complaints, you know. Anyway, I live in a 19th century home and I've been slowly trying to get it fixed up to modern code, but I still want to retain as much of its original features and style as possible. The biggest challenge was the main bathroom, which had all manner of rust, leaks, and a shower that didn't work, but all the major companies I talked to only did modernish remodels and weren't willing to perform a restoration, which is what I was actually looking for. Then I found Dante's Handiwork. Mike was incredibly kind and professional. Not only was he willing to take on such a unique and difficult task, but he also made sure everything was up to code while still keeping it as close to my design choices as possible. I would definitely recommend his services to others. This is why more people should shop local. Here's some photos of the finished bathroom, which turned out beautiful. We also discovered some oddities within the walls as stuff was being torn down, which can be a common occurrence when you're digging around in a house so old. I find these unexpected time capsules charming. I realize the writing on the exposed wall in that last photo is a bit hard to make out, so I'm retyping it here for the sake of clarity. From what I can see, I'm pretty sure it reads, "Just as urged on my high artistifer, my maker was divine authority, the highest wisdom and the primal love. Before me nothing but eternal things were made, and I endure eternally." After a bit of searching, I found out this is a quote from the Inferno portion of the Divine Comedy. I wasn't sure what to make of that at the time. It was actually the newspaper that grabbed my greater attention. Kane also happened to be the last name of Pentalpha Pine's current mayor, a mayor that also mysteriously disappeared following the bell tower disaster and had yet to be found. But for that moment, I put that bit of info on the back burner when I stumbled across another online review, this one from Thumbtack, which had a profile for Mike Dante. To me, anyway, the guy appeared to be somewhere in his 40s and a bit on the chubby side, in so much as he had a spare tire on him. Looked friendly, at least. My wife and I were putting in a finished basement and installing new hardwood floors, but we needed help pouring the cement base underneath so the floors would be even. That part was out of our skill range. We hired Mike for the task, and he was very timely and efficient. The only surprise we had were a few drawings on the exposed floor, probably for when the house was first built. No clue what they were. Almost looked like a child's doodles. Probably was. We snapped some pics for posterity, then Mike poured the cement and leveled the new floor. Thanks to him, we avoided a major headache and can now enjoy our finished basement. Thanks, Mike, and your excellent service. Anyway, that's my review. Hope it helps anyone reading this. Just like the reviewer, I couldn't tell what the drawings were supposed to be either. Whatever they were, they definitely had hooves and horns or antlers. My best guess is that they looked goat-like. At the time I found the review, I didn't think too deeply about it. That picture of the old newspaper headline reminded me that this town's mayor was still MIA. I was more focused on tracking down some of the community center employees or town reps to look for clues to the mayor's whereabouts. So the next day I paid a visit to Pentalpha Pines Town Hall. Beforehand, I swung by the local bakery and grabbed a box of donuts to bring for everyone, since the gift of food usually endears you to people. Town Hall was about as big as a decently sized post office, and not the extravagant White House-aping institutions you typically see or picture in your mind, another reminder of how small and quaint this community was. Although everyone was clearly scrambling to keep things in order with the mayor gone, I managed to speak to the Public Works Director, Bart Francis, a tall gentleman in his early 30s who was probably called a beanpole multiple times in his life. He said no one was sure where Mayor Kane disappeared to, since he typically ran a pretty tight ship, and it wasn't like the mayor to take off without telling anyone. But everyone was cooperating with the police and hoped they could find him. Judging by how stressed everyone seemed, I could believe that. Bart and I then shot the breeze for a bit in his modest office. Evidently, the guy needed a break from all the town chaos, and those donuts I offered helped in loosening him up a bit. It turned out he was also one in a long line of descendants of Pentalpha's original founding families, much like the mayor. Guess this dude was a historical nerd in addition to being a beanpole, but researching the town was part of my assignment, and I told him as much. He lit up like a kid on Christmas and fished around for a piece of scrap paper, then wrote down some numbers and addresses for me to learn more about Pentalpha's background. Only as I was folding the paper to shove in my pocket did I notice the scrap he used was the back of an old flyer for Dante's Handiwork. A light bulb went off in my head, and I fished in my pockets for the business card that one volunteer had given me. Sure enough, it and the flyer were an exact match. Bart must have noticed me staring because he asked if I was okay. I said I was and held up the flyer. "Where'd you get this?" "Oh, that? I found it on a telephone pole one day," he shrugged. "Guy did pretty good work. Looking for some hired help, I take it?" "Sorta," I half-lied. "What kind of job did he do for you?" "I had a critter problem at my house back in March," Bart explained with a sigh. "I kept hearing scratching, growling, and all kinds of noises in the walls. The guy came and set some traps. Must have been using some pretty good bait. By morning, he already caught something." "What was it?" "You know, I'm actually not sure." Bart scratched his chin as he thought back. "It was a solid black box, so I couldn't see into it. The guy took a peek, but all he said was that it looked like some kind of raccoon or groundhog or something. I don't know. I didn't really care what the thing was, I just didn't want it in my house. The guy just loaded it into his truck and left." Bart shook his head. "Guess we didn't count on this thing having babies. The noises started up again a week later. Luckily, the guy was able to come back. He set more traps, caught whatever it was, spread some kind of white stuff along the base of my house outside, and that was it." "White stuff?" I asked. "Yeah, some kind of grain or powder. Kind of looked like salt, actually. but I wasn't going to touch it. Probably a repellent. Bart was speaking casually enough, but it seemed like there was something he wasn't saying. As politely as I could, I asked, "Did this guy ever say what this thing was?" "Not really." Bart got this faraway look in his eye. "I only caught a glimpse as he was hauling the traps to his van. All I saw was a tiny hand with claws, and some kind of forked tongue jutting out from the bars, and it was snarling the entire time. It was like no raccoon I'd ever seen or heard of before, but I haven't had any problems since." Bart finally came out of whatever flashback he was having and blinked at me as though he'd forgotten I was sitting across from him and only then remembered. "Why'd he ask? Don't tell me you got a critter problem too." I shook my head. "No, just someone from the community center mentioned hiring a handyman to fix something there prior to the fire. Pretty sure it was this guy." "You think he's a person of interest?" I wasn't sure at that point, so all I remarked was, "Let's just say I'm following a hunch." It looked like Bart was contemplating something for a moment, and then he finally admitted, "You know, now that I think of it, one of my neighbors down the street from me had something weird going on at their house a while back." He pointed at the old flyer in my hand. "Since that guy took care of my critter problem, I gave them his number. Maybe they'll know more about him." He flashed me a warning eye. "Provided they agree to talk, that is." "I getcha. I've had more doors slammed in my face than I can count." I spoke from experience. "You won't hear any harassment reports about me. Promise." I must have given off my best friendly and trusting face because Bart proceeded to dial up his neighbors, asking if they'd be willing to be interviewed. After a few minutes of having to overhear small talk about an upcoming potluck and someone's cat and pretending to not be impatient, I scored names and an address. I thanked Bart twice as I left, all while silently praising the power of good donuts. On my way to my next lead, I tried dialing Mike Dante again, and was once again met with the same recording of a voice that shifted between a Brooklyn and Canadian accent, something I only then noticed the more I listened to it. For a moment I considered lying and claiming to need a job done in the hopes that would lure him out, but then thought better of it. Chris Hansen I was not. I'd only pull a stunt like that as a last resort. Instead, I followed the lead I was given and hoped I'd find some answers that way. I was greeted by the sight of a quaint little cottage as if someone cut out a magazine photo and pasted it into reality. If there was some kind of best yard contest going on, these people would be a shoo-in to win. As if to prove my observation right, a middle-aged couple was busy trimming their hedges as I pulled in. They introduced themselves and confirmed they were Bart Francis's neighbors, James and Beth Exodus, before leaving me around to their patio. Their backyard garden was overflowing with sunflowers from one edge of their property to the other, making it just as picture perfect as the front yard, and I said as much to them. Beth thanked me as she brought out a pitcher full of lemonade, to which the three of us sat in rocking chairs and sipped drinks as we talked. Since Bart told them I was coming, there was no reason to waste time with small talk, so I cut to the chase and told them I was putting together a story about the disaster at the community center. When they asked me how their home improvement projects could have anything to do with a building burning down, I admitted I heard through the grapevine about odd things going on in town and that they might be able to help. I thought I made the mystery sound bigger in scope than I believed at the time. Little did I know how prophetic that statement would turn out to be. James and Beth gave one another a sideways glance before making me promise I'd keep their names off any official records. Only when I agreed did they tell me that, a few weeks prior, they had a leaky kitchen faucet. And even though James was able to fix it, they grew concerned when their water started turning a deep red color. "Our house uses a private well water system," James explained, "so we couldn't just call up the water authority because that's not their jurisdiction." "So you hired Mike Dante, I take it?" I already knew the answer. Beth nodded. "He showed up on March 18th and worked up to the 20th. I only remember because it was my niece's birthday the day before. I was pretty surprised how fast he came, since Mr. Francis gave us his information just 3 days beforehand. That tidbit helped me determine the incident with Bart probably happened on March 14th and 15th. Still wish the dude would respond to me. As I was trying to establish a timeline of events, Beth continued, I was kind of put off when Mr. Dante pulled up in his company van. It was all rusty and repainted over, and I think the bumper was being held on by duct tape. But I was always taught not to judge by appearances, and he was pretty polite and seemed to know what he was doing. He got right to work on digging around in the yard to see if something went kaflooey with our well. He even had a kit to test the toxin levels of the water and soil and stuff. She got kind of quiet after that, taking an extra long sip of lemonade as if to try and get out of saying anything else. I dared to break the ice. So what did he find? The color drained from Beth's face and James squirmed in his seat. He wouldn't meet my gaze as he said, "Things we wish would have stayed buried." He found bones. Really? Up went my curiosity. What kind? Not sure. A lot of them were decomposing. I do my fair share of hunting, so I recognize some animal skulls, but my gut told me some of them looked like they might be human. James shook his head. We got afraid that Mr. Dante would take off on us or call the cops thinking we did something unsavory, but all he said was, "You hired me to fix your sink, and that's what I'm gonna do, and that includes figuring out why it keeps running blood instead of water." Even though it was still springtime and comfortably cool outside, James's forehead was sweating up a storm as if his confession were about to get him sent to prison. I had my suspicions of what the red water actually was, but kept quiet so no one would think I was loony. I was secretly thankful Mr. Dante confirmed my fears. "So what did he do?" I asked, wondering how a plumber could stop one of the 10 biblical plagues happening in some random house in Maine. Didn't seem like much at the time. James rubbed the back of his neck. He fetched some gadget from his van, readjusted the faucet, and then gave us a bag of sunflower seeds to plant. Said that if nothing else, they'd help remove toxins from the ground. He also told us to have a company dig further underground if possible, or research our property to see if this used to be some kind of burial ground. Then he just cleaned up all the bones, we paid him, and he left. Considering how old this town is, I wouldn't be surprised if there used to be a cemetery around here that's been built over and forgotten. Beth finally found her voice again. We never really looked into it, though. Even if there was a burial ground here, we're not going to have our entire house and yard dug up and destroyed if we can help it. She stared down at the clinking ice cubes in her glass. We replaced a couple parts in the well, planted the seeds, and lived off bottled water and prayed for anything to improve. She then motioned toward the garden. Obviously you can see the flowers sprouted, pretty quick-like too. The moment the buds started appearing, the water turned back to normal. Thank God. I gazed out at the miniature sunflower field, now seeing it in a new light the more I turned over their story in my head. It's so easy to forget how precious simple things like plants and water are until you lose them. Even though it sounded like they recapped a Twilight Zone episode to me, I kept a poker face as I asked, "Did you ever bring this up to the county at all?" We tried to at the bi-weekly town meetings, but the mayor kind of brushed us off. He said since we had a private well, any problems with it would have to be taken care of by us, not the water authority. Beth let out a defeated sigh. Also, we were too scared to mention the bones we found. We didn't want our neighbors thinking about us the wrong way, so we let it go. Especially after the water went back to normal anyway. Her mention of the mayor reminded me of the more pressing mystery I was supposed to be investigating. I gave my best reassuring smile. "Well, you don't have to worry about me thinking you're nuts. In my line of work, I've seen far worse." I rose to my feet and shook their hands. "Thanks for the drink and all the info. I'll let you get back to your lovely garden. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to get to the bottom of all this." And for their sakes and my career, I hoped I could.